What's up guys, CuzBadGuys here, back with another video. This is going to be a tournament report with my Orcs and Goblins. Remember to like and subscribe, it helps out the channel. The tournament is going to be War Games for Warriors 2024, held June 1st. It's 3 games, 3-hour rounds at 2,000 points. So let's go over my Orcs and Goblins army. I'm going full infantry. So getting on to characters. My war boss is going to be a Black Orc war boss. He has a hand weapon, full plate armor, a shield. He's on foot, has the Ogre Blade and the Talisman of Protection. So this guy with the full plate armor and the shield has a 3-up armor save, and the Talisman of Protection has a 5-up ward. So pretty tanky at toughness 5, 3 wounds. Not super tanky, but still pretty good for being on foot. With the Ogre Blade, he's going to be doing a ton of damage as it's +2 strength, -2 AP, and D3 wounds. So his weapon skill 7 is really high for a hero character. His initiative 6 is going to make it so he goes before some chargers, so he'll go before like giants and stuff, being able to dish out damage before regular line infantry and stuff on the charge, and then doing a ton of damage with the Ogre Blade with the multiple wounds. Moving on, we've got a Black Orc Big Boss. He has a hand weapon, a great weapon, full plate armor, is upgraded to be the Battle Standard Bearer. That is a war banner for +1 combat resolution. He has the glowy green amulet, which is if he or the unit he's in is ever targeted by a spell, instead of doing a dispel attempt, I can roll a dice, and on a 2+, it's just denied. If I roll a 1, the amulet explodes and causes 1 wound to the bearer, and then the amulet doesn't ever work again. This is a huge benefit to the unit that he's in, as this essentially makes it so his unit is never targeted by enemy magic. He then has a Charmed Shield, which is a one-time use 5-up ward save, which is great. It's a common clutch ward save that is just there to help keep him alive in case he's targeted. I really like the combination of having a shield with the hand weapon and the great weapon, because then you can choose how you want to swing in close combat, and if you want to be tanky and survivable, or if you want to use the great weapon and just smash face. Because he's an orc, he also has the chopper rule, because he's not taking a special weapon like a magical weapon. So on the charge, he gets 2 reroll 1s to wound and has +1 AP, so his great weapon goes to AP 3. Then let's talk about the Orc Weird Knob. He has a hand weapon, has been upgraded to be level 4, has the Lure Familiar, so he is picking his spells. He has the Ruby Ring of Ruin, which is the bound fireball at power level 2, and is taking battle magic. So with the Lure Familiar, with this guy, along with the Ruby Ring of Ruin, I plan on always taking fireball, so he's got 2 fireball spells. Pillar of Fire, Arcane Urgency, and Oaken Shield. These spells are pretty self-evident for what they're doing. He's a machine gun of fireball spells, so is really my shooting in the army, and is there to remove screeners and skirmishers, that kind of stuff with fireball spells, and just push out damage, as much damage as possible. Now let's talk the Night Goblin heroes. So first off, we've got a Night Goblin Odd Knob. He is upgraded to be a level 4 wizard. He has the Wand of Jet, so has a +1 to cast and +1 to dispel. But if you ever roll a double, the wand breaks and can't be used again. The magic item also says may, so you don't have to use the +1 whenever you cast or dispel. You get to pick. So it's really good to add a +1 on those chances where your opponent has rolled an 11 or something, like something high. So you can add that +1 to try to get your better chances of being able to dispel, or the spell that you really need to get off, throw that +1 on to try to make sure that you get it off. He is also taking Wa Magic. This guy, my plan is essentially to just roll on the Wa table and take whatever I can get, which is going to be best for the scenario, whether that's going to be Vindictive Glare or the Evil Sun or Foot of Gork, any of those things. But I will always drop a spell to take Itchy Nuisance for the debuff for minusing toughness and initiative, as that spell is very, very good. Moving on to the other two characters, they are copy-paste. They are essentially just in the list to make it so I am able to take 3 units of Night Goblins, and they are 2 Night Goblin big bosses that have hand weapons, great weapons, light armors, and shields. So these guys, just like the Black Orc big boss, have the ability to pick between using the hand weapon, shield, or great weapon, depending on how they want to or need to fight in the round of close combat. Moving on to core, we've got the Stars of the Show, which is going to be a big unit of Black Orcs. This is going to be a unit of 18. They come with hand weapons in full plate. They've been upgraded to have 18 shields, 6 great weapons, 12 additional hand weapons, and then full command. So a champion, a standard bearer, and a musician. The standard bearer has been upgraded to have the big red raggedy flag, which is going to be +1 weapon skill to everyone that's in the unit. So if the characters are in the unit, they also go up additional weapon skill, and it's also +1 combat resolution. So this unit I have found is very effective, and not much can actually stand up to a Black Orc unit, except for other elites. So stuff like Grail Knights and Chosen Chaos Warriors and Dragon Ogres, like really elite, heavy hitting stuff. Black Orcs can pretty much go toe to toe with them because they're walking in with toughness 4, 3+ armor save, and then they can really punch back between taking those great weapons and the additional hand weapons, so either more swings or higher strength, and then also with the AP of the great weapons and the chopper rule. So on the charge, they get +1 AP. Next in core, we've got a unit of Night Goblins. This is going to be 28 Night Goblins. They have hand weapons, thrusting spears, shields, netters, which is going to be in the round of combat before initiative is done. You roll a dice against one unit that you're in base with. On a 2+, that unit is -1 strength. On a 1, your unit of Night Goblins is at -1 strength. So they essentially net themselves if you roll a 1. This is actually really, really good, as the Night Goblins are toughness 3, and it drops things from usually wounding them on 2s or 3s to 3s or 4s. Sometimes it'll even drop things from wounding you on 4s to wounding you on 5s. So like other spearmen, it'll make it so they're wounding you on 5s instead of 4s. It's incredibly effective, really, really good. They also have 3 fanatics, which fanatics do fanatic things, and you push them out on the beginning of either your turn or your opponent's turn. The fanatics move during the compulsory move phase, so after chargers have been moved, but before regular moves have been done, which can be incredibly powerful as long as you know how to time the release of the fanatics correctly. They're incredibly powerful. This unit is also upgraded to have full command, so unit champion, standard bearer, and musician. We then have 2 copy-paste units of Night Goblins that are 20 men each. These are also upgraded to have thrusting spears, shields, and 3 fanatics. This is just to have me to have more access to more fanatics. They then have only a champion and a musician, as these units are sacrificial, and I don't want to be giving up banner points to my opponent for when these units die, as they almost surely will. Lastly, we've got a second unit of Black Orcs. This is going to be a 12-man unit. They also have hand weapons, full plate armor, have been upgraded to be stubborn, have 12 shields, 4 great weapons, and 8 additional hand weapons, along with full command, so champion, standard bearer, and musician. The reason for stubborn on this unit is because this unit is going to be the weak side of my army, so whichever flank I feel is going to be the hard press side, these guys go into, and their stubborn makes it so no matter what they get hit by, as long as they're still alive, they will auto pass a break check and just fall back in good order. It can be crucial with an infantry army, making sure that your weak flank is really locked down by something like this with stubborn. So, what are my generic battle plans for deploying this army and facing against an opponent? So, as you can see here, this is a generic plan for a deployment style. The big unit of Black Orcs is going to always be centralized with the 3 characters in it as their infantry, so they do not have the speed to be able to get to wherever they want to be on the board. So you want them to be centralized to be able to put their presence felt the most throughout the game. Then the 2 units of 20 Night Goblins with Fanatics will be directly next to either side of that big unit of Black Orcs. Then the big unit of Night Goblins will be on one flank and the other unit of Black Orcs will be on the other flank. It all depends on where you think your opponent's going to be putting a caster for the odd knob to be able to dispel, and which flank you think is going to be weakest. So where did they put their cavalry or their flyers, that kind of stuff. It all depends on how your opponent deploys and what the match looks like. There's no nuanced tactics around this army, as it's all infantry. You just want to march forward and engage with the opponent. That being said, there are some tactics to be able to be used with using this army, so let's go over that. Now, I can already hear people saying, but cuz bad guys, in your deployment, one of your units was in marching column. Why would you do that? Well, I would like to introduce you to what I'm calling the Night Goblin Torpedo Super Sneaky Fanatic Attack. I'm sure Night Goblins will come up with a way better name, but this is what I've come up with. So, what you do is you put a unit of Night Goblins in marching column, makes it so they can move 3 times their movement instead of 2 when they march. You then have an orc that takes battle magic and has arcane urgency. You can also do it with elementalism, but I like it more with battle magic because of fireball and all the magic missiles. You then march the unit up 12 inches. You target it with arcane urgency, moving it another 12 inches. And at the end of that movement, instead of moving just 12 straight forward, you actually pivot just a little bit, just like this. So you put yourself between 2 units. So in this scenario, I put myself with my corner between a unit of Chaos Chosen Knights and Warriors of Khorne that have Frenzy. I stop there, and then at the beginning of my opponent's turn, I push out my Fanatics, and then those 2 units have to deal with Fanatics turn 1. In the local meta, elite armies are pretty prevalent, so things like Warriors of Chaos and Bretonnians. I think this kind of strategy is going to be very detrimental to each of those armies as they run high point value, low model count armies. And I think Fanatics are just going to be really, really viable and do a lot of damage to opponents. I am recording this before I go to the tournament, so we'll see how this strategy actually pans out. Starting off round 1 at the tournament is Flank Attack versus Bretonnian Exiles. It is a 6-turn match with just victory points. This is my opponent's army list. The things I took big note of is that he has a paladin with the frontier axe and the virtue of knightly temper instead of his baron. He only has a level 2 damsel for magic defense, and then he has 2 units of Pegasus Knights. I forgot to take a picture of deployment, so this is a picture of the beginning of turn 2. So we can start off by showing my deployment. So my deployment, I chose my small unit of Black Orcs, the 12 unit, to be my flanking force, and I chose my left flank for them to go, as his right flank, which is opposite me, had a hill, and I figured that's where he would put his cannons, so I needed to put my Black Orcs over there to threaten the cannons and make him have to move assets against the Black Orcs. Then, following from my left flank over, it would be my unit of Night Goblins in marching column, followed by the unit that needs to go in the middle of my battle army, or the middle of my battle line at all times, which is going to be my big unit of Black Orcs, followed by a 20-man unit of Night Goblins, and then the 28-man unit of Night Goblins. I was able to get turn 1, so we essentially just moved forward, and I targeted the Night Goblin unit in marching column, pushed them all the way across the board. I put them in front of his unit of men-at-arms and his big unit of Pegasus Knights that had all the characters in it. And I essentially made him choose to either charge the Night Goblins or stand there, and he chose to stand there, so I pushed 2 fanatics through the Pegasus Knights and 1 through the peasants, which did quite a bit of damage. I killed a Pegasus Knight and one wound on a character, and then killed 4 men-at-arms, I think, and then he didn't charge me, and I was able to reform that unit, and then that unit and the men-at-arms sat in combat for the whole game, and in that unit I had one of my heroes, and because I had my hero over there, I was able to just keep killing men-at-arms, and we essentially would tie combat every round. But because my hero was over there, I kept killing enough of his guys that by the end, all of his guys were dead, so I was able to wipe that unit out without needing to do more work over there. On my left side, where my smaller unit of Black Orcs are, they got charged by the Pegasus Knights and the heroes. They did exactly what they were supposed to do, take a hit from a big elite unit, and then with stubborn, fall back in good order, and then take the follow-up, and locked them in close combat for 2 rounds in a row, and really mitigated the damage that big unit would be able to do, and made it so their damage was all in one place, and I was able to go after the rest of his army with the rest of my army. So moving over to the middle of the battle line with the 18 Black Orcs with my BSB, my general, and the shaman in it, they just walked forward, and then I shot fireball at the peasants that are over there in skirmish formation, and I just kept shooting fireball over there, and whenever I could, I would try to target the Pegasus Knights that went after the Black Orcs. The Pegasus Knights started jumping around behind that forest, trying to get a line to be able to do a charge against the big unit of Black Orcs, but he didn't want to charge the front arc of that unit of Black Orcs, so he was waiting for some of the rest of his army to break through the rest of my line. Moving over to the next unit of 20 Night Goblins, that unit also had a hero in it, and he charged it with his BSB Pegasus Knight, which I just challenged it out with my unit champion, and then that unit just sat in combat for that one turn. I was able to pass my Leadership 9 break check with my general right there with a reroll from the BSB. So I passed that with flying colors and just gave ground, so I backed up 2 inches. The next turn, my Night Goblin Shaman, which is at the corner of that unit, put Itchy Nuisance on him, and then I pushed out 2 fanatics from the 20-man unit and then just pushed them through the that Battle Standard Bearer on Pegasus, and he just died. I did a trick with fanatics at the end of the second one's movement, is to push him into the first one so they kill each other, so those 2 fanatics don't do damage to my army. So I pushed one through the standard bearer, and then I pushed the second one through to hit the first fanatic, and I rolled enough distance to make it so they actually ran into each other and they killed each other. Moving over to the 28-man unit, that unit had his big unit of regular knights with the damsel charge them. I didn't push out any fanatics because I always want to receive charges before I push my fanatics out, because an opponent has to declare charges after I show that the fanatics are out. So you don't want to push fanatics out when your opponent is like 16 inches away. So I moved up and was ready to take the charge, but didn't want to commit my fanatics. I was close enough to my general that I knew that I had a really good leadership to be able to test on a break check, and that's exactly what happened. So the knights charged in, did some damage. The next turn, I pushed fanatics out. You can see them. This is turn 2. The fanatics are over there towards the Pegasus Knights that are next to the building. And then I had one more fanatic that was ready to go through the knights. And he went through the knights and then ran into the forest and died. And then the following round of combat, I killed the rest of the knights because I had Evil Sun Shining up, which made it so I had a +1 AP on my attacks with all of my spears, and from that and the damage from the one fanatic was enough to just destroy the unit. The 2 fanatics over there being pushed towards the Pegasus Knights, both of them got pushed through, and those 2 ended up just wiping out those 3 Pegasus Knights behind the building. After turn 2, I ended up pushing forward more, used my fireball machine gun orc to shoot the rest of those bow peasants that are in skirmish, and then I bantered back and forth with my big unit of black orcs and the Pegasus Knights. And the Pegasus Knights that are on the left, they kept trying to get a good charge on the Black Orcs, but the Black Orcs, I just kept pivoting them to make it so it was always a front arc charge. And he didn't want to try to fly over me because I had 2 units of Night Goblins back there that each had a fanatic. So I had 1 fanatic left in each of those units. And he didn't want to risk getting hit by 2 fanatics on his unit of Pegasus Knights with heroes in it, because he didn't know if they would take too much damage or not. And if he flew over, he would also get in range of Itchy Nuisance. And at that point, he didn't have any magic defense left because I had already killed the damsel. This entire time, the cannons on the hill just kept bouncing cannonballs through my Black Orc unit, the big Black Orc unit, and they were killing 2 Black Orcs a turn, which against infantry, cannons aren't really going to be that effective. Like, sure, you're going to kill a couple guys every turn, but they weren't able to really rack up a lot of damage because my army was just infantry. So it was really hard for him to get really good targets. And every once in a while he would have the cannonball stick in the ground or overshoot the unit. And I just left the cannons up there alone. I tried to go after them with that first unit of night goblins, but the peasants were there and were able to fight with them, and they fought the whole game. So this opponent, he was a great guy, super cool. He and I actually went to lunch right after this match, and we like picked each other's brains on Warhammer, the old world, and like what we like and what we've seen and what the meta has been and our experience. And super cool guy, tons of fun to play. He was in one of the previous tournaments that I played in, which was the lightly salted tournament at Paragon, and he and I hadn't fought each other in that tournament, but he and I were able to get matched up in this one, and we had a super cool game and tons of fun. That being said, we ended with the Bretonnians getting 294 and the Orcs and Goblins getting 1451. On to round 2. This is going to be Command and Control versus High Elves. It's a 6-turn mission. The middle, we are fighting over a forest. It's worth 200 victory points, and it's standard victory points conditions. This is the High Elf army list. The things that I took note of is he has a prince with the white sword. He then has a mage on a frost phoenix. He has Phoenix Guard and a frost phoenix as a rare choice. So this is deployment for round 2. I knew that I needed to really pressure the center of the board because the forest was worth 200 victory points. So I changed up my deployment style for my just generic battle plan. So I still did my unit of 18 Black Orcs in the center. They're always going to be in the center with all of the characters. And then right next to them, I did the unit of 12 Black Orcs, and on the left side of them, I did the unit of 28 Night Goblins. In the unit of 28 Night Goblins, I did all of the heroes for the Night Goblins, so I did both Night Goblin Big Bosses and the Odd Knob. Then on the very outskirts of my army, on both flanks, I did the 20-man units of Night Goblins, and I did both of them in marching stance. So they would be able to threaten really far at the beginning of the game and maybe pincer around that forest to be able to throw out fanatics. My opponent responded by deploying from right to left. The white frost phoenix is the one with the mage. Next to that is his bolt thrower on a hill. Next to that is a unit of 10 archers also on the hill. Next to that is his unit of spearmen with his level 4 mage inside of it. Next to that is his unit of Phoenix Guard with his prince inside of it. Next to that is the standard Frost Phoenix. And then on the my left flank is his scouting Reavers, which he could have put more behind my army, but he didn't want to because he knew that I could cast Arcane Urgency and really move one of my Night Goblin units and just throw a fanatic at him. So he wanted them to be a little bit further away. Starting off with turn 1, I was able to win the roll-off to get turn 1, and I was able to Arcane Urgency the Night Goblin unit on my right flank, I was able to push it up and put its corner in between the spearmen and the archers, and essentially was exposing my flank to that mage on Phoenix Bird. And it didn't take the bait in coming up and charging me. The spearmen did, so the spearmen took 2 fanatics, and then I pushed those 2 fanatics through the same spearmen again in the turn when I was able to move them. So that unit of spearmen took a ton of damage that beginning round, and I actually killed them down to being only, I want to say, 12 guys, with those 4 fanatic hits from just 2 fanatics, because they charged and landed on them, and then the fanatics have to pop out, and then I moved them during the compulsory move phase, and I just pushed them through the spearman unit, doing tons of damage. And then 1 fanatic that was on the flank facing the mage, I just pushed through the archers. I killed 5 archers with the 1 fanatic. After that, those fanatics just spun around and didn't do anything on that flank. Didn't hit anything, and just spun off and ended up rolling doubles or off the table and died. The unit over there ended up fighting that unit of spearmen, and then later the spearmen and the Phoenix on the mage on the Phoenix, the Frost Phoenix, and he was able to wipe out that unit. In the meantime, the unit of Black Orcs, the 12 unit of Black Orcs, marched up and kept getting shot by the bolt thrower and the archers that were right there, and they lost a couple guys. But the shaman jumped out of that unit and jumped into the unit of 12 and started putting Oaken Shield on that unit and kept throwing fireballs out. And with fireballs, I actually ended up killing the spearman unit down to 8, which was just not enough to be able to get them to be under 25%, and killed the archer unit and took the mage from full wounds down to 2 wounds. So he had 2 wounds left. And then I just kept pivoting that unit to make it so that Phoenix never got a flank charge. And then he kept his spearmen back and just kept walking them up to be within maximum charge distance, because elves are movement 5 and orcs are movement 4. So he always had an 11-inch charge, and I only had a 10-inch charge, maximum declarable. And I would just move back an inch to get out of declared charge range, and then make sure that my flank wasn't to the mage on the Phoenix. In the center, the big unit of Black Orcs with my general and the BSB pushed through the forest and started going toe-to-toe with the Phoenix Guard over there. The Phoenix Guard and that Black Orc unit kept smashing into each other and doing damage to each other. In the first couple rounds, he did declare a challenge, but I had my unit champion step up and try to prove himself, because he had the white sword, and I didn't want my Black Orc war boss just dying to killing blow. So the first combat, he killed my unit champion, of course, with the white sword, and then my unit and the Black Orc big boss and the war boss smashed into the Phoenix Guard, killed enough to be able to win combat resolution. They fell back in good order, and I pursued, and the way that I pursued is I pursued into the regular Phoenix, the regular Frost Phoenix, because he had put it up and set it up to be a speed bump to stop a pursuit in case he fled and I pursued. In the following turn, I used my Night Goblin Odd Knob to put Itchy Nuisance on that Phoenix, and I dropped its toughness from 6 to 3. And then in the following combat, my Black Orcs just cut that Phoenix to pieces because it was toughness 3. And then I ended up getting charged again by the Phoenix Guard. This time I was like, okay, let's actually do a general off. And I accepted the challenge against the White Sword. He hit with all of his attacks, which I was like sweating. And then he wounded with all of his attacks, but he didn't get a 6. So he didn't get a killing blow. He rolled 3s, 4s, and 5s. So got wounds at AP2. I was able to save 2 of them out of the 4, so 2 wounds ended up going through onto my war boss, so he was at 1 wound left. But then my responding attacks back with the 4 attacks with the Ogre Blade, I cut that prince down and won the challenge. The Black Orcs then in combat were able to beat the Phoenix Guard, but they passed their break check. They fell back. And then this is where I failed my leadership check in being able to restrain. And I actually ran out of the forest chasing the Phoenix Guard, trying to chase them down. The Night Goblins, the 28 Night Goblins, moved up and were just being a barrier against those 5 Reavers, and trying to make sure that they wouldn't get a flank charge on my Black Orcs, and kind of posturing to make sure that that Phoenix stayed over there by the Phoenix Guard and was kind of at a long charge range. I then stepped up, and then the Reavers charged the little unit of Night Goblins, the 20-man unit. I just took that charge. I passed my break check, and then the next turn I pushed 2 fanatics through them and killed the Reavers. Then the game suddenly ended because I didn't realize how close we were to end of time, and we actually weren't able to finish out turn 6. So we got to turn 5, and then the game ended because we ran out of time. Because our combats and our magic phases were taking pretty long, because our 2 mages over there on my right flank where my Orc Shaman is and his level 4 is, they essentially kept shooting magic back and forth with each other, and we essentially kept nullifying each other. Like every once in a while a fireball would go off, or every once in a while pillar of fire would go off and it would get dispelled the next turn, and we just kept going back and forth like that. So that I feel slowed us down like with time, and then the combat between the Black Orcs and the Phoenix Guard also took quite a bit of time. My opponent was great. We had a great time shooting fireballs at each other and stuff, and like essentially all of our magic just fizzling out. He just laughed when I ran that unit of Night Goblins over and threw fanatics out through his spearmen and stuff. And then we were both super excited to see how the general off was going to go with his prince with the white sword versus the black war boss with the ogre blade, who was going to be able to win and come out on top. He was able to go first because of the charge and everything, and then it just ended up that the Black Orc was able to take the hits and he didn't get a killing blow, so I was able to kill the prince, and it was just a ton of fun. Even though we weren't able to finish out the game, the game was a blast. So that being said, the High Elves ended up getting 176 points to the Orcs and Goblins getting 879 points. On to round 3. Round 3 is going to be meeting engagement versus a Bretonnian Grand Army. We were playing 6 turns with victory points and reserve rules. This is my opponent's army. The notes that I have from it are that he has a prophetess that is a level 3, so has a low level of magic defense, has 2 units of Pegasus Knight, so has some really high mobility, and then also brought some Grail Knight, so has some very elite, hard-hitting troops. Starting off, we've got deployment and reserve rolls. So me going through my army, rolling for reserve rolls, I rolled a 1 on my big unit of Black Orcs and one of my Night Goblin big bosses. So both of them had to stay off the board and come in after turn 1, so presumably turn 2, which is totally what I did, is I brought them in turn 2. My opponent rolled a 1 for one of his units of regular knights, the questing knights, and one of his units of Pegasus Knights, and those are the 3 units that are up there in the top right corner. So that means that his BSB, which was a questing knight, didn't have a unit to be able to be put in, and he had Impetuous, so he needed to stay his back as far as possible. Going through his deployment on what would be the right side is the unit of Pegasus Knights that was able to come in, a unit of regular knights that are standing there on the trees, his lord on the Royal Pegasus. Then on the hill is his unit of 20 peasant archers, and then to the left of the archers is his unit of Grail Knights, and just behind the Grail Knights, not in the unit, is his level 3 damsel. My deployment, so because this deployment style, you're only 12 inches away from your opponent's deployment zone, I deployed my army back quite a bit because I didn't want to be turn 1 charged in case I didn't get turn 1. So I deployed on my left flank a unit of 20 Night Goblins, then the unit of 28, then the unit of 12 Black Orcs, then in marching column at the line, a unit of 20 Night Goblins. I put all 3 of my Orcs are in the unit of 12 Black Orcs, and both the Night Goblin Shaman and the Night Goblin Big Boss is in the unit of 28. I was able to get turn 1 as my opponent was Bretonnian, and he chose to pray for turn 1. So I started off by Arcane Urgencying the unit of 20 Night Goblins that were in marching column. So they marched forward, and then I Arcane Urgency'd them, and I put them in between the Knights of the Realm and the Pegasus Knights. In my opponent's turn, I pushed out 1 fanatic towards the Knights and 2 towards the Pegasus Knights. In my shooting phase, my Black Orc unit just moved 4 inches forward because I wanted to be able to do Fireball twice. So I shot Fireball twice at the mounted knights, and between the mounted knights and the 1 fanatic, I killed all of those knights. The 2 fanatics against the Pegasus Knights, I actually only killed 1 Pegasus Knight. My opponent passed a ton of ward saves, which was super cool that the lady was going to be giving him the blessing and all of the protection. The rest of my battle line just marched forward, staying in line with the Black Orcs because I wanted to give a unified front against all these knights that were going to be coming onto the table. I also put out Pillar of Fire to make a dangerous charge for the Lord if he wanted to charge in on his own, and waited for the onslaught. My opponent didn't end up charging the unit of Night Goblins that were in marching formation. He just moved his Pegasus Knights over the unit. So I was able to reform them the next turn, and I put them to make it so they were 5 wide instead of 4 wide, so out of marching column, and I faced them towards the peasants, the peasant bowmen, to go threaten them, because they wouldn't be able to catch up to any of the knights or any of those things. As it happened, his BSB, this was just a happy or unhappy coincidence, his BSB was right behind his peasants and could actually draw a line of sight to that unit of night goblins. And on his turn, he had to see if he would be impetuous to charge that unit of night goblins, and he failed his impetuous check. And then it just so happened that the line that he had to charge made him cross a fanatic. So he ran through a fanatic and killed himself. My turn 2, I brought on my big unit of Black Orcs to the right of my unit of 12 with all of my characters. In hindsight, I should have Arcane Urgency'd them to get them moved up further, and it just slipped my mind to do that. I should have totally done that, because then they would have been able to get into the fights sooner than they actually did. But I essentially just turned just a little bit because I knew my opponent's reinforcements would also be coming on. I used Fireball from my Orc to shoot at the Pegasus Knights, who I also Itchy Nuisanced, so they went down to toughness 2, so my Fireballs were wounding them on 2s. I still only killed 1 Pegasus Knight out of the 2 that were there. My opponent was passing all kinds of saves for this unit. I put a ton of wounds on him, and he just flying colors passed a ton of saves. I also threw out my Pillar of Fire to throw over in that direction to go after the Pegasus Knights and try to threaten the Lord. And then I also put out Foot of Gork, which you can see there on the left, the big template. I did put it originally in front of the Grail Knights, and then it scatters 2d6, and it scattered all the way over there to the left. In my opponent's turn 2, his reinforcements came on. So on the left is a regular unit of knights. Just next to them is the questing knights. And then in the back corner to the right is the unit of 3 Pegasus Knights that came on. In his shooting phase, his peasant bowman shot at my big unit of night goblins, and that unit kept targeting the unit of night goblins and killed 2 or 3 of them every turn. Also in turn 2, his damsel cast Pillar of Fire and killed one of the fanatics in that far back right corner, so the one that had killed the paladin BSB. Then it was the beginning of my turn 3. So my turn 3, I moved my Pillar of Fire vortex into the Pegasus Knight, which then bounced through the peasant bowman and the damsel in the back. It ended up killing the Pegasus Knight, killing 5 of the peasant bowmen, and killing the damsel. In my movement phase, I tried to declare a charge with the unit of 15 night goblins up there in the top right against the bowmen. I actually ended up failing that charge. The 2 fanatics that were still left alive both rolled doubles, so they both died to poisoning themselves by their mushrooms. And I then did another Arcane Urgency on the unit of 20 night goblins on my left flank. That unit moved straight up to be right in front of the Grail Knights and the Lord on the Pegasus. In my opponent's turn, I pushed out 1 fanatic to be on their left flank and 2 to be right in front of the Grail Knights, because I was essentially being like, okay, you have to like either declare a charge against me or I'm going to push these fanatics through you anyway. He declared a charge with both the Grail Knights and the Questing Knights, so both of them ran into fanatics. The Grail Knights ended up dying to the 2 initial hits from the fanatics and then the 2 push-throughs, because I pushed both fanatics through the Grail Knights to just finish them off. The Questing Knights passed a ton of lady saves from taking the initial hit and taking the push through hit, and I only killed one questing knight with 2 hits from a fanatic. The questing knights then super beat that unit of night goblins in close combat as they were in the flank. They ended up falling back through my Black Orc unit of 12 with the characters that had moved up. And then the questing knights chased and actually ended up running into the front of my Black Orc unit. It was then the beginning of my next turn. So my next turn, I put Itchy Nuisance on the questing knights, and I ended up rolling a 3 on the D3. So the questing knights dropped to initiative 1, even on their charge, and to toughness 1. So in the ensuing round of combat, the Black Orcs with the 3 characters absolutely destroyed the questing knights before they could even swing. And then the Black Orcs overran and blocked the line of sight for the Lord on Pegasus to the unit of night goblins in the back. So the Black Orcs were like right in front of that Lord. The unit of night goblins that had ran through the Black Orcs rallied, and I had them march back to go pick up the goblin hero that was running around in the backfield all on his own. The unit of 29 night goblins with the nets turned to face the unit of mounted knights that were there in the left flank. And I had Evil Sun Shining up on them, so they were able to reroll 1s to hit and had AP1 on their weapons. And then they also had nets. In the next round, my opponent's next turn, his knights charged that unit of 28 night goblins, which had dwindled down now because they kept getting shot by the bowmen. And my opponent just super flubbed his rolls. He needed 3s to hit and 3s to wound because I netted him, so he went down from strength 5 to strength 4. So he didn't get a single wound through with any of his knights with lances, and then 1 horse killed a night goblin with a horse kick, and then my ensuing hits back made the entire unit of knights evaporate. He had 4-up armor saves because I only had AP1, but I think he only passed 1 armor save, which was pretty rough for my opponent. Seeing the writing on the wall, my opponent backed up his peasant archers and flew his lord to the other side of the hill to mitigate damage against him so he would give up less points and not give me the general kill. I had 1 more chance to be able to do Vindictive Glare at the Lord. So this entire match, I was doing Vindictive Glare as many times as I could against the Lord, as he didn't have Lookout Sir or any of that stuff and was on a Pegasus. And every single time I cast the spell, I rolled a 1 to wound him. So I never wounded the Lord the entire match. Can't say enough cool things about my opponent. It was pretty funny because we laughed about the Vindictive Glare thing at the end of the match, because essentially it was his lord and my Night Goblin Shaman staring at each other, and his lord didn't even have to pass ward saves. He just stared the goblin into never wounding him with his magic. That being said, the match ended with Bretonia having 176 points to the Orcs and Goblins having 1669. And with that, we counted up wins and victory points. So I ended up taking first place with 3 wins, 3,999 victory points, and my strength of schedule was actually really strong, as all 3 of my opponents, they placed 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place in the tournament. Again, I want to thank the organizers. I want to thank all of the participants. The tournament was absolutely great. I had a blast. I'm glad a ton of people had a ton of fun and showed up and played Old World. The game is so much fun to do. In this tournament, I actually won a trophy. So there's this black slate trophy that they gave me for the win. Super gracious. I'm really grateful for this kind of prize support. It's super cool. I'm totally going to put this in my office and have it up in my backdrop for when I record other videos. So how do I feel my army did? Well, I think it's safe to say that the Night Goblin torpedo totally works. The counterplay to it is incredibly difficult. Fanatics can be, if you utilize them correctly, can be very powerful and really punch a hole in your opponent's army as long as you target the correct stuff. I'm really impressed with just the 20-man blocks. I thought they would die much more quickly than they actually did. And they would go toe-to-toe with my opponent's infantry. Just putting one of the heroes in them made them so they had that upper hand to be able to actually take out other infantry. Moving on to the Black Orcs. I love Black Orcs. Black Orcs are amazing. I have great success with them. Doing the ratio of great weapons and additional hand weapons and everybody gets a shield is incredibly effective. It makes it so you can kill hordes really, really well. You can punch up against monsters. You have the AP against things like Cav or other army elites that are in full plate or have a really good armor save. I was surprised at how much I could utilize the 6 different characters because I thought 6 characters was a lot to take. And taking the 2 level 4s, I think it was worth it. The Night Goblin Shaman, I'm not sure if I would take him again in the future. I might actually drop his points to being just another Night Goblin Big Boss. But the Orc Shaman with the Lure Familiar and the Fireball Ring, he's amazing, pumps out a ton of damage. The Arcane Urgency, targeting units, being able to get your infantry units actually moving around the board pretty quickly, totally useful and almost mandatory for a full infantry army. I don't have enough shooting to force my opponent to move to me, so I have to utilize movement and really be aggressive and go after my opponent. And I want to hear from you guys. What kind of success are you guys having with Orcs and Goblins? Are you having great success with Fanatics? Have you already used the Night Goblin Torpedo? And what have you been able to kill with it? Remember to like and subscribe. And remember, 'cause bad guys.